This is the fourth edition of Planeyo Book Circle. To God be the glory. Join us as we start. Thank you, Lord, for the year 2026, that you've made it possible for us to be alive, to see in health and in provision. Welcome everyone watching to the first edition of Planeyo Book Circle in 2026 and the fourth edition of Planeyo Book Circle going forward. I'm glad to welcome all of you to the year, and so I'm telling you, wishing you a very happy new year. It's a year of blessings, a year of good things, and as we continue to read and promote the culture, as we continue to work hard for success, personal and collective. For today, we have two guests. We have Marvelyn Ekot, the author of How Are You? She's here in the house and will be speaking to us and about our books and our life. And of course, we have Johnson Turner all the way from Canada, who will be joining us live to speak to us about his amazing work, Two Left Legs. And then I will also talk about my book, my poetry collection entitled The Groans of 279. I'll be reading from the collection, and it's going to be a great session, and I'm asking you to stay tuned. For those watching live, thank you so much. I promise you that we're going to have a great one today. So once again, welcome to Planeyo Book Circle, January 2026 edition. And remember that Planeyo Book Circle is the gathering of book lovers in Rio and its environs, and we are poised to promote the literary culture in our society, get more people to read so that we can bring about the needed change in society at all levels. Very soon we'll be taking on our guests, and for now, we have to listen to some music. Remember that our theme song for this month is Emmanuel Eshe by John Fadejola. And I want to listen to the theme song once again before we begin. We have come to say Eshe for the great things that God has done, for making us to see this new year. We are about to take on our first guest, Johnson Turner. Johnson Turner will be joining us all the way from Canada to talk about his works, especially his book Two Left Legs, published by Planeyo Publishers in 2025. Johnsonism as a philosophy. The philosophy of Johnsonism. The Johnsonistic philosophy. Yeah, it is morning in your heart. So how are you doing today?
It's morning in that, it's not just morning in my heart.
Yeah, everything now shows that time is perspectival. So, so
Yes,
from my perspective, it is money in your hat, right? So, Johnson, how is Canada today?
well, the tiny corner where I live is fine. It's very cold, very, very cold, but it
Okay.
is okay.
That means you are in the heart of winter, right?
Yes, so in the very heart of winter, it's minus, let me see, I think it's minus 15 degrees. It's minus 13 degrees right now.
That's serious.
But there's something funny about the way they report the weather here. So they're going to say it's minus 13, but feels like minus 20, which means that the actual weather is minus 20. I don't know what that means, but I guess you do know what you feel like it's the real thing.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
how? What are the basic things that you need to do to survive the cold?
to survive the cold, I think the most effective thing would be to just stay indoors. But for those that are working, just layer up. This is my third winter in Canada, and I've never had proper winter gear. And for some reason, I'm still alive. God is really good.
Yeah, I think it's the god of the winter, and
Yes, no, I'm also saying, since I work remote yet, so I'm also saying, I don't even know what I need to right now. Yeah.
yeah. So, how would you compare life in Nigeria and life in Canada? What would you say are the basic
Honestly,
differences?
honestly speaking, the only major difference is that we have vampires in places of authority in Nigeria. That's just it. We have leaders with vampiristic tendencies. That's just ordinarily life in Nigeria is way better. And weather is better almost all year round, right? And we do have the rainy season in Nigeria, but the rainy season is just that, lot of rain. Over here, we also have a rainy season, spring. So the most difference, the system works over here, just in terms of basic amenities. Now that Nigeria has introduced taxes, income taxes to the system, I'm eager to see how it will work. Because over here we pay a lot of taxes, but we are also fortunate to see the taxes at work. Of course, here and there the government will come stupid things, but there is a basic and the taxes are visible. The amenities work, the public system, the public transportation system works. The things can be better, but basically the public system, transport system works. There's a bus stop right in front of my house. Whenever I need to go outside, I can look at the time, at 5 minutes, if the bus is coming in 5 minutes, I get down. One of the things that I find most interesting is that the buses over here, when you get on, they wait for you to sit down before they move. Of course, that is not the same thing in Nigeria. If you like sit down, if you don't like, don't sit down. You can just get the bus and you start moving. You can even get injured. That's interesting. Another thing that I like about it is that in most places, when you move into a new apartment, typically it comes with almost everything. It will come with a fridge, a microwave, washing equipment. That's very interesting. That does not obtain in Nigeria. Some apartments come with even furniture, depending on the owner, the property owner. You build it in such a way that you move in only maybe some stuff. You don't see an apartment that came with plates and lanterns, you know. But that doesn't happen in Nigeria. So that's another thing. But culturally speaking, it's a very individualistic society. You could die in your house. You could die for 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, and nobody would know.
Nobody
Nobody would
knows.
really care,
Wow.
which is very terrible. And I've read a story of a woman who died in the UK for more than 2 years. Nobody knew,
Wow.
you know. I know she had set up, you can set up the tools to pay automatically.
Yeah.
You can set up your rent to be paid automatically from your account, you can set up all of those things. So she died in her house for more than 2 years.
And there was nobody to check up on her. That's sad.
And there was nobody to check up on her. We're in such a society where once you're 18, you can leave your parents and not speak to them yet for life. I think that's crazy, you know. So that's the main thing that nobody really, of course, when you study, when people don't really talk to each other like that, no matter the problem you have, there's really nobody to talk to. So I've met, I have classmates who were in financial trouble and went to take loans, and their parents are very rich. It's that bad, you know. You can have very rich siblings, you can't really call and say, oh, my father, please help me. It's something that doesn't happen, but it's not the norm, right? You meet people that are homeless and on the street, but they have parents who are very good, very big houses. So over here, it's easier for somebody to give to charity than to give to their family, which I don't understand, you know. So that is just too individualistic for my liking. You know, if I'm at home and a friend calls and says, hi, but let's go. The assumption is that as I'm coming out, I'm coming with my friend.
Wow.
Meanwhile, in Nigeria, if you ask me to come out, there's that assumption that, okay, you are good enough to
you're
pay.
Going to pay.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
That's true.
So individualism has gone to very inhuman things to punishment. Not inhuman is the word, but inhuman is the meaning of the thing that leads to what you said, but that's going to the level that is unhuman. It's not healthy and typical of human beings. You know, as long as you're like, there's no moral fabric for the society. You know, all there is law. If you're not doing anything illegal, it's fine. But there's no moral fabric. There's no consciousness of right and wrong. There's a consciousness of what is legally correct, legal and illegal. And we all know that life goes beyond what is legal. There are many things that are not necessarily illegal, but are not good. That's the thing that I find very, very weird. I also find here and a tendency to hand people to bribe very quickly.
Okay.
So let's say I did something very great, the society becomes proud of. If I were a Canadian citizen, they would say, oh, a Canadian man has done this and done that. But the moment I do something that's morally despicable, regardless of the fact that I've been a Canadian citizen maybe for 10, 15, 20 years, the narrative becomes, oh, a Nigerian immigrant. So there is that tendency, the society has a tendency, even a clamor, to partake of people's glory or push them out immediately if they have done anything ignominious.
Yeah.
And I find that very, what happens in almost every society, but I find that there's a lot of profiling, very quick profiling, whenever somebody does something terrible. I don't even want to go to the fact that just by being somebody of a different skin color, sometimes you get treated differently. So one of the things that I remember when I first came here, one of the things that was outstanding to me was the fact that I immediately became visible. All my life I lived in Nigeria, you know, and in Nigeria race is not a problem because everybody is of the same race. Of course, in Nigeria, we have our own issues, you know, ethnicity, language, religion, right?
Yeah.
But I remember the first day I landed in Halifax, I just suddenly, the first morning I was walking, I felt very visible. Because, what do you mean I'm walking past the first 100 people and all of them are white? You know?
Wow.
So that does things to you. Even if nobody is necessarily discriminating against you, that sudden change of reality has a way of making you feel that perhaps your color is the reason why you're getting treated the way you're getting treated. When I was in Halifax, I just always thought that nobody liked to sit next to me on the bus. Now, I don't have any way of saying objectively that is true because these are also people that are very individualistic. They would rather go sit down in a different bus that is completely free and be alone. than be snuggled up close to somebody, right?
Mm.
But because I felt very invisible, I felt very visible as a person of a skin tone, I always wondered, could it be, oh, they don't want to take this close to me because I'm a black man, you know? But there's really no way to tell if that is it, you know? But it's better in Canada, though. At least in Canada, there are typically not very many brazen of racial groups as
Okay.
opposed to the US.
Yeah.
You know? So Canadians are more passive aggressive. You know, they will say sarcastic things to you about you. Sometimes you will understand some of the things they said after a year or after 2 years.
Yeah.
You will understand the real implications of the things they said.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working.
Yeah. Go on.
I remember when I was. I remember when I was working security once in Halifax, and I fell asleep. I fell asleep. I fell asleep for maybe 2 minutes, or 1 minute, or 2 seconds. I don't know. It wasn't for a long time. And it was ironic because the guy that I was on patrol with, a white guy, he was the one that tapped me and said, "Oh, Johnson, you shouldn't be sleeping at work.
And then this one.
If our manager hears about this, he's going to be serious." And then I said, "Oh, thank you, Jack, for tapping me. I've been tired, you know." That was my first time working security, working 12-hour shift, you know, working at night, not sleeping at all, you know, that sort of thing. Can you imagine that it was Jack himself, after tapping me and telling me to wake up, that if our manager finds out that they're not going to be happy? It was Jack himself that went and reported me to the manager to sleep, you know, which was crazy because, like, if you're in Nigeria and maybe let's say you fall asleep where you're not supposed to, and somebody taps you, that's just going to be the end of it. Like,
Yeah.
you close your eyes for 2 minutes, no big deal, that's going to be the end of it. That's not even the thing that worried me. It was just the management, the security, not a forgotten his designation, but it was like a manager. It was like, you know, if you are not sleeping, you know, people, he started telling me about how he is originally Italian, and people have a way of thinking of Italians as more bosses and crime lords, and that, you know, if you do certain things, after a while, people will begin to think certain things. And I didn't really get what he was talking about. But it was after some time when I said, this guy is really saying that, oh, because I'm a black person and I fell asleep at work, that, you know, black people are lazy and this. That's fundamentally what he was saying. You know, he started by telling me how, because he was Italian, people have become king of Italians, that drum lords, and you know, what do I think? And then he even asked me the question, what do I think is the implication of what he's saying? I didn't get what the process he was saying. And it's later the thing occurred to me that I can't practice what he said. So like Christians are like, they are passive aggressive, you know, they may not do anything very brazen to you. Now there are parts of Canada where I hear that they are more brazen, you know. But that's really what it is. So, but I mean, when you decide to move to another country, you take the decision of bearing whatever children have of you,
Yeah.
bearing whatever ill treatment of you. It's a 50-50 situation, but it's also a situation for the lesser evils, right? Relative to what you want to achieve by moving overseas are the little things you go through worth it. And I took that decision. I don't think I regret it. At least I got a world-class education from the top 10 Canadian universities. And this is particularly important to me when I tell people about it because at the time I left Nigeria, at the time I started applying for my applying to school and applying for my visa, I had classmates who I went to university with who started their master's degree at the University of Wales. They started at least 9 months ahead of me. Because I remember in January of 2023, they came to me and said, "Oh, Johnson," I was working for Harvard at the time. They were like, "Johnson, we're about to sign the master's form. Are you sure you don't want to sign up?" And I'm not ready to do one extra day of schooling in Nigeria because it's a grueling system. They were like, no, we know you want to go abroad, but just start this first. You never know. Sometimes before this abroad thing will click and that sort of thing. But I just said I was adamant. At least I had a meaningful job and I was happy about. So I was adamant. Do you know that those guys started their master's program in January 2023? I moved to Halifax in September 2023 to start school. I received my certificate, my fully completed master's certificate in October 2023. It was sent to my house. And today, I know at least two of those people haven't finished that program.
That's amazing.
They haven't finished their master's
That's
program.
serious.
At the University of the Department of English. I know at least two of them that haven't finished. They just kept having issues and issues and issues. So what happens is, you will do the coursework, you will finish, but at the point of writing your thesis, you will have a lot of trouble. So when I look at things like that, now that I have a master's degree now, my classmates that started 9 months before me all haven't finished the same degree in Nigeria. I think it's really worth it. There's nothing some one person will say to me that will be so great and it will trump that. And I'm also looking at starting a PhD this year, right? And 4 years is 4 years. And you're going to be funded. You know, those are the little things that don't happen in Nigeria. I went to school fully funded. My scholarship was largely funded by my department. Things like that don't happen in Nigeria. You know, there are these miniature cases of witchcraft that make education really, really difficult for people in Nigeria. So, yeah, the experience is totally different. The country is in a class of its own.
Yeah, that's true. So, many people keep moving out of Nigeria, and it makes it look like out there is heaven. Supposing you would like to advise people on maybe the government, the people, on how to stem the tide of the rush out of the country. What do you think are those things that ought to be done to retain the professionals and stop the brain drain?
Well, honestly, I don't think, first of all, life abroad is not heaven. The system abroad is built to make everybody middle class. That's the first reality. And I think everybody knows this quite quickly. The number of immigrants that get into the top 1% of the society anywhere is perhaps like 1%. Almost no matter how skilled you are, no matter how intelligent you are, talented you are, no matter the ideas you come with, you almost will fall into the middle class immediately. You know, I think the reason why people move abroad, which is, I think the reason why people move abroad is not necessarily to become the best of the best. It's just to live a normal life. That's my thinking. So the thing that would bring people back to Nigeria, bring professionals back to Nigeria, is the restoration of normalcy. The average Nigerian is accustomed to things being so bad that we don't demand much. So if we just have a normal system, things will be normal. For instance, if people can be certain that they get into school for a 4-year program, they will finish in 4 years. I don't think anybody will kill themselves necessarily struggling to go abroad for school. And then if other things attached to going to school are set in place, it is absolutely ridiculous that we are graduating over 100,000 lawyers per year, maybe millions, I don't know the stats, and we are in a country where the law doesn't work. The average Nigerian knows that the law doesn't work. The law only applies to you if you're poor and not connected. The law doesn't work. And I'll give you an example. Look at the incident that, I worked in aviation, so I have a way of knowing. Look at the incident that involved Senator Adams Oshomole, for instance. Whether you were right or wrong that, the people delayed your flight or the late you don't have the right to hold the flight hostage. That is a crime. You don't have the right to hold the flight hostage and hold people hostage, making sure they cannot fly. That is a crime. That's the definition of hostage taking. When you limit people's ability to move or exercise their free will by any type of force. That's hostage taking. But nothing happened because of victory is the senator. Look at the incident that involved Richard Part 1. Technically the same thing, you know. We live in a lawless society. So people that are studying law, for instance, there's no job for them. The court system doesn't work, almost doesn't work. The infrastructure is failing, the education system is up and down. The government of Nigeria needs to. Nigerians are not asking the government to pay them money every month. Nigerians are not asking Nigerians to pay them unemployment insurance or pay them money when they're like, Nigerians are not asking for anything. We're just asking for a normal system. A normal system. The basic duty of the government in Nigeria is the government can provide security and infrastructure. I can almost guarantee you that immigration from Nigeria will cut down by if not more than 50%. Because at that point, the people that will leave are people that really need to leave, right? But the problem with Nigeria now is that everybody is leaving. You can find somebody that is a child that is 10 years old, 12 years old, still being fed by their parents. But if you really have a discussion with them, they already want to leave Nigeria. Because there is a general despondence in people. The people are not happy. And it's because things don't work. You can be in your house and people will not come here and kill you in the middle of the night. As it's happening in the middle there. Nobody wants to live in a place like that. And then once stop, you can get killed, and then the people that have killed you will walk free. The government will negotiate with them, even pay them money. Nobody wants to live in a system like that. Look at this man, Samuel Jackson, I think is his name, that defended himself against bandits some time ago. They came to his farm, they fought with him, he even has wounds to show that it was a bloody contest. But because he survived it and killed his attackers, he was charged to court for murder. He was sentenced, he appealed the sentence all the way to the Supreme Court of the country. They threw out his self-defense case and said he should be hanged, he should die by hanging. It was until all of this drama with President Trump and the intervention of U.S. senators that he's now free. Now we can speak to the motive of those people, of the Americans in their intervention. But the truth is that an innocent man now has his life back. Now, if you are Samuel, would you rather live in Nigeria or live in America in a situation like that? So you see that in Nigeria, the common sense is upside down. You find leaders who are against something today, but the moment another party is in power, they are now for it. Those are the things that are corroding our society. The average Nigerian just wants security and basic amenities, and we are good. So I visited Nigeria in July of last year, right? After I've been outside for two years. I visited Nigeria, and it felt like after 2 years of living, everything was just the same or even worse. The government doesn't do anything to help the students, to help the citizens create prosperity, and that is the problem. Nigerians thrive in spite of the government and not because of it. In every other part of the world, people thrive because of the government, because of policies that are put in place. So that's just my opinion. If the Nigerian government could provide just two things, security and basic infrastructure, the tide of migration would be cut by more than 50%. The average Nigerian living here does not really like living here like that, from my experience. That's why every December people are all over the country because they want to have that feel of home for a few and then be gone because they are trapped in the same system. That's it. That's my honest opinion.
Yes. So if you look at the polar views that are contained, because we are talking about how to make the post-colony a better place, right? So if you look at the polar views that are expressed in these two texts, the first one is how Europe underdeveloped Africa, and the second one is how Africa underdeveloped Africa, or how Africans underdeveloped Africa. by Stanley Gue. When you put those two views together, where do you stand? Are you going to synthesize so that we know exactly who to blame and how to move forward? Given that we might still have colonialist experiences or neo-colonialist issues to deal with, even when our leaders are in control.
But I think that my position on that polarity really stems from my I don't know how to frame this now. It really stems from my opinion on the value of history. Not the value of history, because history is entirely valuable, but say the relevance of history, right? So the question then becomes, for how long is the person conditioned by the history, right? That's the real question that polarity begs. On the one hand, and the point is that two things can be true at the same time. So for instance, I'm a man, I'm also Nigerian. Those are two things that are true at the same time, right? So two things can be true at the same time. We can admit that we have been done a great wrong by Western powers, but we can also at the same time admit that we ourselves have not done anything right. I think that the people who say that, oh, Africa is like this because of the colonial experience, say that as a way of refusing to take accountability for what is going on. So my position would be, yes, something terrible was done to Africa, and it's still being done to Africa. But the way I look at it is that, I watched a movie by Nicolas Cage. I don't remember the title, and in it he said, anybody that is stupid enough to get duped deserves to be duped. And that is how I view the entire argument. The way the world works is that people will always try to take your stuff. People will always try to put you under subjugation. It's a custom of if you let them. So let us look at the entire colonial dynamic. Nigeria was not the only country that was colonized by Great Britain, for instance. India was colonized by Great Britain, just like Nigeria. The US was colonized by Great Britain, just like Nigeria. Canada, what we now, and where very many Nigerians are flocking to, was colonized by Great Britain. In fact, Canada still has an elementary system, and the official head of state of Canada is the King of England. So there are still very strong vestiges of that colonialism, right? Australia, where very many Nigerians are flocking to, was also colonized by Great Britain. Thailand was colonized by Great Britain. So Bangladesh was colonized by Great Britain. The colonial experience in Nigeria was not as bad in terms of economic deprivation as it was in India. As I speak to you today, on the British crown, the huge diamond on the British crown, the big purple diamond, I still remember the name of it, it's from India, and they have been clamoring for its return. Jamaica was colonized by Great Britain. There are so many countries that were colonized by Great Britain that are doing so well today that it makes nonsense of the argument that the current state of Africa is exclusively a matter of colonialism. I'm telling you the truth. Look at the country like the United States, for instance. We can argue about the dynamics, okay, when did they leave, when did they take independence, before this and that. But at the end of the day, the destiny of the people is always in their hands. That is the truth. The destiny of the people is always in their hands. And certain people realize that, yes, we have historically dispossessed, but what can we do about it? And another set of people cry at infinitum about their economic dispossession. It's just a question of what we consider as priorities. My position is, and always will be, that Nigeria has too much resources to still be crying about colonial dispossession. We have too much resources. We have too much human resources. We have too much economic resources to be crying about economic dispossession. And how do I know this? Our leaders themselves are not living at the same level that we are living. And that's everything. If Nigeria was one wasteland that, everybody is just living in abject poverty and, nothing is going on, we would say, okay, the white man came and really, really did damage to us. But in Nigeria, there are people that are very rich. There are people that are very well off middle class. And there is one thing in common that all of these people have. And that is the fact that many of them are somehow in power. So that nullifies the entire argument. So I think my position on the post-colonial debate, with a great respect to Stanley and Walter Rodney, is that the case of Nigeria, for instance, is just the case of it's like an orphan. It's like a child who grew up an orphan and you are now 30 years old and you are still complaining. I don't have anything because my parents were not rich. Yes, your parents were not there or your parents were there. So what? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to spend all of your life complaining about it? Or are you going to rise up and take some responsibility? I think that the main problem with Nigeria is mental irresponsibility. We have refused to take responsibility. And I tell you this, ask the average Nigerian. People in Nigeria, we are very quick to complain about our leaders and this, but ask the average Nigerian their opinion on things. You will see that nobody is ready to take responsibility for anything. Everybody is satisfied if they have somebody they can blame. So it has very little to do with the colonial enterprise. Maybe from certain points to a certain point in each one. Somebody like me, who was born in the late 1990s, who had never seen a white person prior to coming to Canada, like really seen a white person, who had never interacted with a white person, the people that are the source of my problem, that were the sources of my problem, were the bad leaders that we had, the bad mentors that we had, bad people in the religious circle, bad people everywhere, and they were Africans like me. They were not white people. These are people that are taking the daily decisions that are affecting our lives. It's not some white person. Now, they decide to band up with the white people and do things that are terrible for us. That is a decision. Oppression cannot really work without internal collaboration. That's what people need to understand. There is no form of oppression that can become effective without internal collaboration. That is just the truth.
Wow. So, how then do you view my positionality in the theory post-colonialism? If you are acquainted with it.
That's fundamental. That's my reading of post-colonialism. That's really what you're saying, and I think that it makes a lot of sense, right? Because we need to move beyond. We need to move the post-colonial perspective into a post-colonial perspective. There needs to be a new form of thinking, and I think one of the phrases that I love the most is when we talk about we need to change the center-centered approach, because by constantly talking about colonialism and the colonial structure as the center of all of our problems, we are elevating it to a position of power, rather than reclaiming that power by means of responsibility and determining our own fate. That is the problem that we're having. Even in literature, even in writing, we have that problem. It is almost as if you are not published in the West, you are not a really published author. For instance, people by default will take a book more seriously when they see, okay, it was published in the US. And that's wrong thinking. That's very wrong thinking. And the white man is not responsible for that. People seem to give you more respect when, for instance, you speak with an American accent or some sort of foreign accent. People seem to defer to you unnecessarily. And that's terrible, because somebody can be saying absolute nonsense with an American accent. There are very many stupid Americans, very many stupid Canadians. I meet them every day. There are people that are here, they were born here, they grew up here, and their lives are out of order. We see them every day. But we as a people, because of the perceived economic advantage of those societies, we have ceded to them the right of way. I had a colleague when I worked with Ibon Air, who would greet the white pilot with two hands. One of the white pilots that was contracted to work with us, he would greet them with two hands. And one day I called him and I was like, sir, don't tell me you are greeting these people with two hands. But you greet a regular pilot with one hand. Is the white people responsible for that? He would greet them with two hands and he would even do a little bow. And I'm like, do you understand that these people are working for us? And I'm like, the airline that we lease their aircraft from, Have you ever heard of that airline? They're probably some little back of the world airline, but because they have the aircraft, release it from there. You're reading this person with two hands. Now the danger with that is that pilot will probably, when two, three, four people do that, that pilot will it will register this consciousness that it's supposed to be written with two hands by Africans. So when he now goes to other places, he will not exact that same treatment, and that's where the trouble starts. You know. So I told him, don't do that. So it doesn't have a lot to do with it. It's about us. I think one of the things that we need to do, and even in our school and in the education system, we need to start teaching people that the white person is a normal person, and not in any antagonistic way. We need to start cultivating that consciousness that these people are just people. Good and fine by virtue of organization and skill, they have structured their societies to be good. But there is no super intelligence that we have, that we don't have. So like we need to dispossess that sector, and by responsibility, we make ourselves the center of our own discourses. That's when our stories will truly begin to matter.
Yeah, that's true. So let us talk about your work. And I would like to start with lines of mystery. Okay?
That's the one I don't like to talk about.
Yeah. So, when was Lines of Mystery published?
I think 2012 or 2012.
Where were you in 2012?
2012. I was in Nigeria. I was in secondary school precisely. I think I was in SS2. I was in SS2 at the time. I went to NCI. Everybody knows NCI. Nothing to hide.
So tell us about how you became a published author with Lines of Mystery.
That happened very, very unexpectedly, very spontaneously. I just started writing. I remember I was at the one at the time. That was when we really started learning literature, I started learning poetry. And our literature teacher at the time, Mr. Felix Akko, gave us an assignment to write a poem. Just write a poem. Funny enough, because at the time he taught us that one of the characteristics of poetry is that it is written in a caged language, which is all versions of wrong. But at the time that's what he taught us. So I wrote this poem, and it was for an assignment, and I found out that it was very interesting. I liked it. I showed it to my mentor, Mr. Mike Abaki, who had been my English teacher from JS 3, and so from had begun to mentor me because, of course, I was a bright student. I showed it to him, and I was like, "There's no way you wrote this." And what do you mean there's no way I wrote this? What does that even mean exactly, that there's no way I wrote this? And so I started writing more. I started reading poems, especially the poems that were in our literature curriculum. I started reading them, and as I read more, I wrote more. Right?
Yeah.
In Nigeria, there's an academic culture where we do the bare minimum, right? So if we are studying 3 poems in this term, that's what we are going to read. Nobody has the time to go around reading all the poems in the world. But I started going to the library, reading poems from collection. So did my friend Emmanuel Kondozomen, who also studied English and is now doing very well, teaching in secondary schools in Apago. And the more I read, the more I wrote. The more I read, the more I wrote. Initially it was doubt, my mentor didn't really believe it. It was like, because according to him, some of the poems were more sophisticated than my age, and so it felt like there was no way he could have written this. But over time, he began to believe me, and I remember that within the space of a year, I had written perhaps more than 100, perhaps about 100 poems. I still have the manuscript, actually. I have the manuscript somewhere in my house. I wrote everything on pen and paper. And I have the manuscript in a long higher education note, black cover. There's a cartoon image of the lady in front of it. I have that manuscript. And so after a while, we showed it to the principal of the school. He was head of the English department at the time, and he was pleasantly surprised. We showed it to the principal of the school. The principal of the school was impressed. I think along the line, you came into the picture, and along the line, Professor Joe Ishii, who was then head of the Department of English was brought into the picture and was like, this is too good to not be published. For somebody of this age, this is too good to not be published. I'm not taking it to another. I think that was even when the school was having its 25th anniversary, so they published it and launched it as part of the 25th anniversary celebration. So I think in a way the stars just aligned in my favor, because maybe if it wasn't the 25th anniversary of the school, they probably would have been eager to publish it. You know, maybe they would have. There's no way of telling. But it was easy to factor in the book launch into the 25th anniversary of the school. So everything just went just beautifully. And since then, I've been writing a lot of poetry. I am hopefully going to publish a collection of poems this year. The synthetic title is Lamentation. I've written a novel. I took a decision as I just took a decision as a matter of principle that I will first publish my works in Nigeria. Because I find it ridiculous that our stories speak to our situation, yet they are always published abroad, you know, and it's a locked game. If you get something like prize and then, you know, something happens, maybe you win a prize, then you become a name, that sort of thing. That is when Nigerian publishers then clamor to publish a work, which I think is morally questionable, you know. So I decided that I will first publish my works in Nigeria. Yes, there are challenges. You might not get as much clout and fame, but then, you know, there's other ways to get your work into the hands of people. You know, put it in the school system, you know, do some strategic marketing to get it to be read. So that's how I became a published author, really. And it's funny because I didn't publish anything until about 10 years after. You know, I didn't publish any other work until I published Thriller.
Yeah. So, after Lines of Mystery, what happened in between?
It's a few poems.
Do you remember any of the poems right now?
I remember Abattoir. I remember the title. I can't remember it word for word. I remember that was the title. I remember Unforeseen. I remember A Race for Life. I remember Silhouette. These are some titles from the work. I haven't read it. It's ironic. I don't have a copy of it, personal copy of it. I should look into reprinting it, but those are some of the titles in the work. I just remember the titles, but I don't remember the person. Somebody could practically keep that work, put another title on it at this point, show it to me, and I wouldn't know that it's my work. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, quite interesting. So in between publishing Lines of Mystery and Two Left Legs, what happened? What was happening to you?
What happened?
Yeah.
A lot of stuff like was happening. So I published Lines of Mystery when I was in secondary school.
Yeah.
I published Two Left Legs when I was here.
Yes.
I think I already had a master's degree. No. I published it while I was doing my master's here, so you can imagine. In between that time, I went to university. I finished with a 2-1. I worked at the Bon Air for 2 years, and in that time, I became a literary critic. I published two essays of literary criticism. I've been doing life. It turns out that when you're Nigerian, your big dreams will typically get suspended for survival at some point. You know, so we're trying to survive. In that same time, it was COVID, which was a terrible one, right? So, like, a whole bunch of things have happened. It's a hiatus of about 10 years. You know, in that time, I also moved abroad to further my education. You know, which is another thing. So, it's unbelow. I think for us it's a regular thing. I guess you are the kind of author that created a mechanism by which we'll be publishing every 2 years or 3 years, but if you have it, and then let's not look the fact that it takes a lot of financial capital to publish. You know, especially when you're publishing in Nigeria, I think in Africa generally, you must publish with the readiness to publish at a loss. you must be ready to publish at a lot. If you are not ready to publish at a lot, you may never publish at all. So, raising money to publish a book is not easier to ask when you want to do self-publishing, which is basically the only thing I've looked at the Nigerian author. People talk about famous authors like the Chigozel with Mamanda, Professor Frank, and all of that. Those are like a drop in the ocean. There's so many Nigerian writers that are telling important stories. Only a few people left of notoriety. So it's taking that time for doing a whole lot. I was growing up basically. I was 15 when the history was published. I was 27 when Two Left Legs was published. So I was basically growing up in that time. what young people do while growing up.
Of course, you are still growing up, Johnson. You have more things to do, but you published a great novel in 2025. That's Two Left Legs, right? And I would like you to tell us the motivation for writing Two Left Legs.
It's always difficult for me to state a particular motivation for writing a story. Sometimes the story just comes, and you have to. Like right now, I'm currently writing a novel that I've titled for now, "It's Economy of Nutrition." That novel is born out of the observation of how gambling addiction ruins somebody very close to me.
Okay.
So that is that one. But like sometimes the story comes, sometimes the script just comes. Sometimes you're walking and you see something and you hold it in your mind, you think about it and it expands into a story. So I can't really say that I have one straight motivation for writing Two Left Legs. For one, I was writing it while I was in the dormitory, in the hostel, in school, in secondary school. So when you are not sort of in a dormitory, you don't have any motivation, right? When you are saved up in a dormitory, all you are expected to do is grow up, learn principles, learn life principles, go to school, come back, eat. That's what you're doing all year round. So it's not like I have any unique experience that prompted me to start writing Two Left Legs. But the bottle of life, so the reality that I was a very smart student and I had classmates who were not as intelligent academically, even though many of them have way more money than we do. But that whole thing, and I remember that when I was younger too, in primary school, was part of the anti-child trafficking club. I was being part of their club in State Children's Parliament, and there were things that we heard about child's rights and little things here and there, so that just coalesced into aspects of the story. So, as for motivation, I can't really point out to any one thing as the motivation. I think that sometimes stories can just come alive. You can go read the Bible, see something written in the Bible, and suddenly the soul is ignited. I think writing is like all art, and all good art is truly universal. And that the implication of that is that no story is real, and that everything just happening within the scope of the kind of life can ignite the story in the mind of an observant writer. So at the end of the day, I can't really point out to what motivation, but I can tell you for certain that just the reality that surrounded me growing up as a child in the dormitory influenced aspects of Two Left Legs, but I can't really point out what that motivation.
Okay. So the child character, the narrator in Two Left Legs, are there aspects of his life that can be traced to your extra-literary experiences?
I don't know where that is.
I know it's a trap question, but you try to answer the best way you could.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said I know it might sound like a trap question, but you should You should try and answer the best way you could.
No. It's not a trap question. Just I don't think it's a trap question. I just
Okay.
think it's a question that always comes up.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Especially
so.
when somebody has written an emotional first novel.
Yeah.
You know, I think people are. I think people are eager to. I think people are always eager to find out. Oh, what is something that happened to you? Somebody just read the novel, and this guy I know here in Canada just found the novel already,
Yeah.
and reached out to me, was asking, "Oh, your parents treated you very badly." And I was like, "What do you even mean?"
Yeah. There's always that perception, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, "How do you mean my parents treated me very badly?" Then I was well loved by my parents, and I said, "Never treated me very." And I was like, "No, you know, the way you write about this, it's only somebody that has been in this situation that can really understand." I was like, "That doesn't make any sense whatsoever." You know, but to your question, I think there are aspects of the novel that can trace in my own life. I think the taking in a secondary school, in a boarding secondary school,
Okay.
is something that definitely came from my own experience.
Okay.
Because at the time I was writing it, I was in a boarding secondary school. Now, the school I went to was a church of Christ school, but in the novel, I changed to an Anglican secondary school. And it wasn't until it was published that I realized, wait, this also has something to do with me. Because my family largely grew up Anglican, right? One of my uncles who just recently died, unfortunately, was Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Oyo. So
Okay.
there is that influence to trace that back to me. What else? I was particularly, I was the best student, and I don't mean to toot my own horn. In terms of being able to cram ABC or math, I was good at that. So you can't really trace the protagonist academic struggle to me. You know, I grew up with my parents, my uncle was always lovely to me, my aunt was lovely to me, my mom was lovely to me. So you can't really trace back to me. I think in this world I have one of the most amazing families ever. You know, there was something that Tolstoy said at the beginning of his novel. I think that was War and Peace, which always baffles me. And he said, and I quote, said, "All happy families are the same. But an unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." You know, which is very, very profound. My family has been very supportive, so I still have all of the dentist trauma and all of that. But like, what else can I trace to myself? Like, I can trace the general dormitory stuff, the issues in the school. Of course, I can't trace the John witchcraft thing to myself. I never experienced that, you know. But I've been around. When we grew up in the early 2000s in our family at Cross River State, this obsession with prayer houses, football camp, the things that they do to families is something that I didn't experience directly, but indirectly. I've read a lot about it. I've met one or two people who went through it, you know. So that's just about what you can choose. That's just about what you can choose to me. I don't think that it's necessarily my story. Even though, yes, people will ask forever, always look at you and look at the novel and be like, this guy is on to suffer. This guy is on to suffer.
I don't know. Do you have a copy of Two Left Legs with you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, if you have a copy, you can choose a passage that you would like to read. Let us know the page, and then we'll follow you as you read.
I should read the passage I'd like to read.
Yes, a passage that interests you. Let us know the page so that we can follow you.
Yeah, let me know. Yeah, Stephen, because I'm just with my phone, let me find it.
Okay.
I don't know, how long can the passage be?
Well, I know that most authors usually prefer the starting point, but you are not limited. You can read as much as you like.
I'm trying to find it. Yes. Okay, so that would be page 46. Page 46. I know because we don't use numbers to indicate the chapters, but that would be the chapter title, Thursday Unit I. That would be page 46.
We are there.
Good. So if maybe I may read that entire section that is for the case from the asterisk all the way to 49 at the asterisk, and it's a whole block that hopefully that makes some sense. I think when I can begin.
We can begin. We are set.
Okay, so this is what it says. I wore the white shirt and red tie of football for me when we went Christmas shopping. I imagined looking up to find red clouds in the sky, the way he had some about Christmas colors when I suggested a blue shirt. When I suggested a blue shirt, Uncle came out of his room as I came out of mine. See how everything sits. I didn't say anything as we went downstairs. It was impossible to tell if everything truly fit, or if he was just joking about the way, if he was just joking about how much I looked like a boy scout with my chest tucked in. The dining room was an extension of the living room, with 8 chairs flanking the glass table, 3 to either side and 1 at each end. The chairs at the ends were the only ones with armrests. Uncle's seat was adjacent to the kitchen corridor, and he often made small talk with his wife while she cooked. Even though I never understood a thing, I loved listening to them talk, inhaling and exhaling the aroma of steaming meat and boiling stew, wafting back and forth through the open kitchen door. But that was before Uncle's wife banished me to the end of the table one Saturday, 1:20 afternoon. DJ said, "Move to that seat over there," she said, and extended her as unrelenting as the receipt pointing to the sensitive boxes. She didn't need to add that I was different from sitting anywhere else. That was 2 or 3 times ago. Memory serves me right. Uncle Clash started from the kitchen bearing a tray with key cups turned on matching sofa. He wore a white gown with a fancy red cycle. It wasn't one of the fire uniforms. The fire didn't wear uniform on Christmas Day, just with a touch of red and white. Her African friend the tape, which she held a little lower than she usually did, and I imagined my little singing a Christmas chorus this time. So we thought that the microphone that was umbilical cord, Uncle would announce that he kicked, to which Uncle would explain, he didn't it, the cause of justice. But none of that happened. Uncle's wife nearly placed Uncle's teacup before him and told me to come take mine before hurrying back through the corridor. Why are you even sitting there, baby? Come closer, Uncle said, as I sat down again to take teacup. I wished, in the moment of wishful thinking while packing up the car, that he would ask me to come closer. But when he did, I couldn't come to the courage to. I remained glued to the seat, settling for me to the sofa. Few days after Christmas, Uncle would return to Port Harcourt, and I'd be left alone to play the music for my disability. I didn't move. I didn't say anything, and somehow my stillness amplified the whirring of the in the living room into the back of a storm. He came. I still didn't move. I stared instead at the teacup and saucer before me. The green lining that exit was too familiar. There were dozens of teacups and saucers in the cupboards in the kitchen, but I was restricted to that set. No one used it, and I didn't touch others. I had a separate compartment for my plate, and Uncle's wife wanted it when she served my meals. Circumscription had crept into her home with each miscarriage. Uncle's wife stopped sending me on errands after the trip over one of the steps on the veranda of our farmhouse at the Solomon Estate, her baby bleeding out on the floor. I was in primary 3 at the time. 2 years after that, she stopped listening me into the living room after she had screamed myself away in the full condition room when walking. That was when I became accustomed to my bedroom window. A year later, when we first moved to San Waldon Street, she stopped me from using the general tableware after she had food poisoning and lost another baby. That was when she gave me separate plates and spoons and a separate compartment to keep them in. By the time she lost the 4th baby in an accident on the way to church, she stopped speaking to me altogether, except for occasional snaps and when absolutely necessary. She also began going out on Tuesdays and Sunday evenings in white dresses and head wraps, returning disheveled she's been rolling on the ground. Those were the months when she sprinkled the house with salted water and placed steps of invasion on all the thresholds and window sills. But that also ended when she had another miscarriage, after which she switched from being brittle to being calm and cold. Uncle didn't know all this though. There was so much he didn't know. So many things he hadn't even noticed because he worked in Port Harcourt and was seldom around. And despite the constant assurance that there was nothing I couldn't tell him, I couldn't find the words to frame the haze of sadness that home had come. How could I explain to him that I preferred the caring of a teacher's school to the full comfort that was our home? He didn't it. It was a lukewarm explanation, closer to surprise than anger or anxiety. When I came out of the reverie, I didn't look up at all. I continued taking the green on the edge of the sofa, imagining the possible consequence of playing on everything in my heart of the kitchen cupboard. I raised the office wife's eyes. Pushing back my chair, I headed for the street. I lost my appetite, but I told myself that I only needed to wash my hands because I didn't have enough sleep last night.
Wow, that's fact. Now let us go into, you are one of the, let me say, few authors who centralize children's experiences in works of art in Nigeria. Let us first of all talk about, the issue with children and literature and the depiction of children and literature and the issues. Where we are right now in the literary circle, the level of theory and at the level of writers' commitment.
When I think about the representation of children literally, I sort of understand why people seem to shy away from depicting children. I feel like more than adults, children are particularly complicated to portray. Portraying children is in itself even simpler than usually a child narrator. Because when you get into the task of being a child narrator, you have to be careful. Sometimes you have to be cool with children, with the handling of children in life generally, right? And you have to be careful. And how will the child perceive this? How will the child understand this? And if you're the first person narrator like I do, then it's more complicated. A child is not in that room in that adult conversation, right? But that adult conversation is going to affect the overall ending of something towards the end. So it's a task. Now, understand that there are people who don't really write about children from a careful perspective, the matter of condescension. For instance, I read, we think the second revered serial critic, Mr. Palmer. He was writing about a movie of a with child, and he said the major flaw in the novel is the choice of a protagonist. I love the argument. The argument was simply that children cannot understand the complete fictional affairs, which I think is absolutely nonsense, right? I don't think that makes sense in any way, because the children can be affected in natural fictional affairs. It doesn't, then they can understand national affairs. Children understand hunger. Children understand when they have to leave their homes because of war. Understand when their parents die. They may not completely grasp the immensity, the enormity of the situation. But it doesn't, it's completely unfathomable to argue that children cannot understand. They may not understand to the degree to which the adults will understand. But they understand, and they will keep understanding as time goes on. And another trouble with this is that people look at childhood or look at children as should I say, monotype. But childhood is a whole spectrum, right? There is a child, right? Conventional things of it. The child is a child, and the letter is a child. Legally speaking, you need to become a child at 18 in most countries. But culturally speaking, people are still children to 30, to be honest, right? Culturally speaking, many people are still children to the since now fundamentally. Because, I went to visit my mom when I came to Nigeria, I'm 28 years old, and I go to visit my mom, and she's like, welcome my son, please, I think I'll fetch water. And And in my mind, I'm like, this woman, what is really your problem? After that, don't come back from my down, you're asking me to carry water on my head. But she didn't see anything wrong with that. Because in her mind, she's talking to her little boy just a few years ago, of where I'm asking what for. Now, I can find you a generator to pump water. But there's no way I'm going to go and fetch water. You know, it's not really mean that. But that's just to tell you that, in culturally speaking, childhood is a spectrum, childhood is many things. So I think the challenge that many people have is a two-pronged argument. There are people who just disregard childhood completely. You know, they think that children are not intelligent enough, children are not mature enough, children are not smart enough, sort of understand. And that's where people use the term of talking. And that's dangerous thinking. Because for many children will observe, perceive, feel, and know that you know you cannot just completely disregard. And in any case, it is dangerous to not take into account children's perspective because children will really become adults later. The children of the adults of tomorrow, the adults of today, the children of yesterday. And all of the things that we are crying about in our society for instance, are things that we cultivate with these people somewhere along the line and they're taking up. For instance, my paper, Children's Books, Mathematics and Americana, I made an argument that there's a character called the character of the general. And the first place that character is used, the writer talks about how he has yellow teeth, like a malnourished child. And then when you study that character throughout the novel, that character is the prototype of the seething military government. And then I make an argument that the yellow teeth that suggests a malnourished child is not just about teeth. It is really a symbolism for a childhood of deprivation. And one of the things that deprivation does to people when it eats to their minds, and I also talk about this in detail in my study of the people and Chihuahua State Qualified. The childhood of deprivation implants in people's mindset a tendency for constant acquisition, even constant illegal acquisition. And that is, in a way, that is what also leads to the kind of corruption that we have. You know, so like I know that this is I cannot tie everybody with this brush, but at the end of the day, it's also aspect of it. If you ask yourself, why would somebody steal? Why would a 16-year-old politician that is not going to live beyond another 40 years, for instance, steal money that he cannot be spending in 100 years? It doesn't make any sense. So it's dangerous to disregard children's opinions because the children of today will become adults tomorrow. Whether they become full politicians or whether they become petty criminals, children of today whose opinions we disregard will become children tomorrow. And then on the other hand, there are people who disregard children's perspectives and children's character because it's just a difficult task to execute. I'm now 28 years old. Imagine that I'm working as a 50-year-old author. I probably would have spent about 52 years of my life as an adult, right? But if I am now writing a novel, it's easier for me to write about an adult male, which is the experience that I know. But the beautiful thing about writing from a child's perspective is that you can resonate with everybody. Because the truth is that either your readers will be children writing out or you will want children. So when you write from the perspective of the child, there is that advantage that you can resonate with literally everybody. So that's how people who avoid writing from the perspective of the child, either because they kindly disregard the experiences of children, or because they're not just ready to take up daunting task of portraying things from the perspective of the child. Maybe because they are now adults and they are detached from it, or it's just complex. That's how I feel. And I might think that maybe it was easier for me to do with children because I was writing children as a child. And I began writing children I think in the beginning, the title, it had so many titles, but when I was writing it, I began writing it when I was 14. Almost immediately after my book was published, I began writing it. So perhaps it was easier for me, just writing it at that age. And and within about a year, 2 years, but for the next 8 years, I was just editing, re-editing, changing the character, changing this, changing, and all of that. So it's not really suggesting that I'm a master of it, but it's just saying that, these are the possibilities that people are putting.
Okay, so let us look at the aspect of theory. Do you think that the marginalization of children in the area of characterization in literary work stems from lack of theory in the field?
Oh yeah, I think that it does, argument that I'm a for it, but I think that the root problem just marginalization in society generally, right? In my study of things fall apart, and the paragraph where I talk about the cultural perception of children is more there. So you will find that in that novel, children seem to be culturally pleased, right? When you isolate the proverbs in the novel, you will find that if you isolate all the proverbs, about 70% of the proverbs focus on children in some way. You have proverbs like, oh, when a cow is eating grass, its children are watching its mouth, right? You have a lot of proverbs. But when you really study the fabric of the novel, you will find out that children are very terribly treated in the novel. For example, Ezekiel Lesson, who is not only over that is murdered to abuse the man for a crime that an adult committed, right? You look at the character of somebody as name is beaten 24/7 by his father because according to his father, he's not man enough. Manliness being synonymous with aggression, the warrior ethos, and all of that. Then you look at the character of the Okonkwo, how he suffered the childhood of integration because of his own father's reasons. So I think that just studying from that, children generally get mistreated in society. Okay, study our own society and you will see that children have been apportioned a very utilitarian role. For instance, among videos, we have a proverb that says, what is it now? Which is just a system of scapegoating children. When you really think about it, if the hawk has attempted to kill a chick, is it the fault of the chick that it was going to be killed by a hawk? But the proverb says, blame the hawk, but also blame the chick, which shows you how children are perceived culturally. Then again, they have another proverb that says, so in other words, the whole idea of free children is that when they now grow up, they will now take care of you. Never mind that that child may have his own individuality. And that's why when you look at a novel like Uche Mecheta's The Joys of Motherhood, the children are presented as terrible people because they do not grow up and provide for their mother the kind of lavish lifestyle that is perceived as having many children will provide for you. So we have come to a point where we have assigned a very utilitarian role to children. Children are almost never treated as individuals. They are treated as kind of like the way feminists argue that women are treated. Children are treated as fucking street balls. They were arm hands in the old times. Right now, they are pension plans. If you have many children, when you are old, they will come take care of you. It doesn't really matter how you treated them. It doesn't really matter whether you put a lot of effort into raising them. And especially of the fact that they are your children, they are supposed to fulfill their duty. So I think that problem comes from our culture. It comes from the cultural perception of children in general, which is what I'm going to carry into literary theory, because literary theory is basically a description of life, right? When you look at Marxist theory, it came out of the struggles of people with the class system. Feminist theory came out of the struggle of women with the patriarchal system. Eco-critical theory came out of injustices to the environment in society. So literary theory itself stems from how society depicts people. And what we find is that society does not treat children fairly. Society does not treat children fairly. And Richard has been working on something with lipstick. And one of the things I want to argue is that the language that you use with children is also very skewed in a way. And I give you just one example that I worked with. How did we get to a point where the word kid became a synonym for a child? Yeah, it is originally the young one of a goat. You know, what kid is spelling the offspring of a goat. But somehow across the development of the English language has come that represents with the young one of a human being. Now, is that to say that children are eternally stubborn? I don't know. And let my investigations, my scientific investigations lead me there. But you see things like that, you know. So, I don't think it's really a problem with literary theory. But of course, literary theory serves as a platform for interrogating literature. So when there is no literary theory, it is difficult to spotlight certain issues. So when you propose the theory of infantism, for instance, it's not a very well-known theory, but it resonated with me. I have been writing on it since. Most of my papers have infantism as the critical anchor, and most of the things that I'm hoping to do in the future. For instance, for my doctoral research, I'm proposing what I call childness, which is a concept that I want to use to visualize in another way. So yes, correct. The absence of critical theories that zoom in on children affect ability to engage with childhood as a sphere generally, but I think that absence of critical theory itself stems from the cultural perception we have of children. Now, that is not to say that there are no other theories that sort of delve into children. Of course, the psychoanalysis that leads to children, there are platforms that could potentially speak to children. But obviously, the fact that that really centralize children, and even with infantism, you see that many people don't even want to embrace infantism. I remember when I started attending conferences and presenting papers. First conference I attended in Nigeria was at Niger Delta University in Bayelsa State. The moment I started talking about children's issues and talking about infantism and comparing with the feminist struggle, there was a feeling that became so angry. And she was so angry. And she came after me, what dare you say that children, and after you said the struggle of children with the struggle of women, what do you know about this? And I felt terrible. But I was wondering, why would talking about children trigger somebody so much? You know, it's this cultural perception.
Yeah, I think we have a long way to go in that direction, but we have to keep pushing. Yeah, we have to keep pushing, because you see, we do not have a literary theory that resonates with authors and critics. It will be difficult for us to really mainstream the depiction of children in works of art, and not only that, but how we appreciate works that depict children in that way, without incurring the interpretation of the work as or from the perspective of the theories in children's literature, which for me are not actually what will help us centralize children's experiences in the core literary department. Because the very reason why I proposed infantism was that when you try to talk about children, people say, oh, leave that for children's literature. But children's literature does not deal with how... Yeah, let me finish.
Can I add something?
Okay. Let me finish first. So, because children's literature does not necessarily talk about the core issues that children face in society, the challenges they face in society, it's for me, I also feel like they're being relegated to a department like they do in church. They say Sunday school, that's for children, and as if they're not really part of society, as if they're how do you put it? They're placed in a kind of department where they're only talked about on the periphery. So I'm looking for, I wanted infantism to be that kind of theory that will bring children's issues to the center of literary discourse, whereby while we are talking about other issues that affect society, we can also at the same time deal with children's issues, and not saying it should be talked about in under children's literature, because the irony is that when you get to children's literature, that is where these issues are actually avoided. You know, for whatever reason, they don't want you to talk about those serious things. They just want you to romanticize human experiences, just for the, how do they call it, for the better psychology of the child that's reading. But then when you look at society, you see that children are facing traumatic issues that, you know, should be discussed. But when you want to write about them in children's literature, they are not allowed to write. They say, don't show blood, don't show violence, don't show, you know, traumatic things, as if children in society do not go through those experiences. That's what we are talking about. That's the paradox, and that's the irony of saying, oh, we have a department of literature that is solely for children. So let us talk about that issues there. So, yeah, you can actually add what you want to add if you can listen to me, if you can hear me.
I wanted to mention that another trouble that we have is that, and this has to do with children, is that we are coming to a point where whatever concerns children comes with inherent inferiority. The moment you put children in front of a word, sort of down the seriousness of it. When we say, for instance, children's hospital, there's like, okay, about the rights for children, you know, that sort of thing. You know, when we say, for instance, children's church, right? Oh, it's part of church, but like, they don't give Rema, no serious revelation there. You know, just go there and sing and dance, and the children are happy. We also need to, because it baffles me that children are the cradle of society. Yes, their issues are not as serious as should be. Like, the destiny of the human race basically best the quality of children we have. And yet we are somehow comfortable with children just receiving second-hand children. It baffles me. It baffles me truly.
Yeah, so let's just talk about this passage that you read. You know, one thing I like about your work is that you give the power of narration to the child. Okay, so the narrator here is actually talking about his experiences, traumatic as they were in the work. Let me ask you about Ijente. How did you get the character? How do you come by that character, the gender character, arising from the passage you just read?
How did I come by what? The gender paragraph?
Ijente as a character.
As a character? I mean, he just revealed himself. As like I was saying, I can't really point out to anything and say this was the principal motivation. It's simply because the writer's name has changed. I can't remember all the names. The name has changed at least 4 times between when I started writing. And this is not just him, the names of almost all characters have changed at least 4 times between when I started writing and then. But I think that the principle, the most suitable answer to your question would be, I was in secondary school, you know, I was writing this while I was in the dormitory, and so, you know, as a first-time novelist, it just so happened that the protagonist I was using was a 14-year-old boy in secondary school. I mean, that's why I said in that way, you could say that came from me, but outside of that, his particular experiences just popped out of imagination, you know. I understand that in every author's imagination is rooted in the real, you know, but I can't really directly point out and say, okay, this happened at this time and that time. And there is something very, very spiritual about the writing process, if I may use the word spiritual, and that is the fact the story can just lead you to places you never imagined. So I'm working on a second novel, and in my mind, I have some things planned, okay, this and that, but then you start writing and something just leads you somewhere else. For instance, when you look at Juliet all the way through to the end, the way that it ends is, the thing with Kufri and all of that is something that I never imagined from the beginning. It's what part that writing and the story just leads you somewhere. So the character of the sentence is not, besides the fact that it's just a secondary school boy that, maybe because I was writing at the secondary school boy, there's nothing else. I can't really tell you that it came out from this, it was influenced by this. I can't really. And if you see the way that Student Lex begins, it begins almost at the invitation of boy who is about to go back home, not happy, he would rather be in school, and then every other thing is incrementally released, right? Because of the discipline, it's not stated again and again that he doesn't want to go back home. Then eventually things, it's not like once you go back home, you suddenly go, which is why things begin to happen little by little, and then you begin to see why we would not have wanted to happen. So, the story really just led itself in that direction. The character just came up, and everything began to attach itself. That's just it.
Okay, so as a novelist and as a poet so far, I want you to speak to the creative writing process and possibly what impresses you most about the creative writing process, and if you have any piece of advice for readers, the persons watching us online, very impressive or impressionable advice that comes to mind when someone is writing works like this.
I think the thing that intrigues me most about the writing process is the spontaneity of it. When you were laying the question, I remember there was a poem I wrote which is in Lines of Mystery. The title is Gender Talk Through. And I think I was either having a shower. I think I was having a shower when that punched me. I didn't know anything about gender and feminism. I was in secondary school at the time, but my mentor started talking to me about things in literature, literary theory, and I talked about feminism and gender issues. And I was just in the bathroom, and that poem hit me. And this is the bathroom of the secondary school. So I ran out, wrote it down. Then I hurried through my shower, ran out and wrote it. I think I was even looking for morning duty that day. So the thing that intrigues me most about the writing process is spontaneity. The fact that you can just be walking and then you hear something and the story is speaking, or a poem is speaking. I remember I just recently wrote a poem which I'm playing in my collection, my forthcoming collection. And I left this where I went to school, I was here, but I was just thinking about my time on the Halifax waterfront. And when taken in my, I just had the inspiration and I wrote it. But as to the writing process, I think that writing is fundamentally the percolation of ideas that have been distilled from lots of reading and lots of cultural interaction. So, I think that for an up-and-coming writer, which I am still an up-and-coming writer, I think the best thing you can do for yourself is to read and read and read and read and read. Because when people talk about reading with respect to writing, people think just read novels. No, just be a well-read person in general. Because you will get ideas from so many, what good movies, listen to good music. I listen to a lot of music, and there are so many people that have written spiritual listening to a song. So engage with art, engage with painting, engage with written papers. Just be aware of what the world is, and ideas will be sprinkled in your mind. I've had ideas, for instance, that I thought, okay, this is going to be a novel. But at the end of the day, after engaging with it, I just made it into a short time, two legs. I've had ideas that I was, okay, this is going to be a poem. But at the end of the day, it was just like one stanza or one line. So the writing process is, of course, you need to have a good command of language That is just basic because language is the medium of expression. You need to have a good command of language. But outside of that, you need to become a collector of ideas, if I may put it that way. You need to become a collector of ideas, you farm ideas, really. And what reading does is that it exposes you to so many ideas. So that this year, I have a target to read 100 books, and that's my target for the year 2026. I know that it could not be the highest number, you know. I know that what is actually considerable is 52. If you do one book in a week, you will read 4 books in a month, and that will be 52. But I also have come to a point where I'm varying my reading, right? So this week I'm going to read a novel, next week I'm going to read poetry, the other week I'm going to read a book on the spiritual book because I take spiritual life very seriously, you know, and also I'm going to read a Christian author, most likely a spiritual authority. And then the other book I'm going to read a motivational, and the other week I'm going to read a motivational, maybe something about finances, something about personal development, you know. My favorite authors in that area would be, what's his name, the guy that wrote Outliers. I keep forgetting Malcolm Gladwell. I've listed a lot of Malcolm Gladwell I will read. I've said a couple of things, thinking and the people I will read. Of course, Chimamanda is on my list. I will read all of Chimamanda's work every year. I reread Chinachori's work every year. I'm adding popular fiction to the list. So I think your writing process will become better if you become the farmer of ideas, the collector of ideas. And you know, and really come from just engaging with art in all of its forms, music, literature, and all of that. Yeah. Now, the writing process is not something that, in my experience, I don't think anybody can really teach anybody to tell on the writing process. I took 10 years to write two letters. I cannot advise anybody to take 10 years to write a novel. In fact, I cannot even write any novel anymore in 10 years. I think having gone through the experience of two letters, I have worked by a personal practice by which I can write a novel in 1 year. I can write a novel in even 6 months, given the environment. So that is it. And I think the only thing I would have as a piece of advice for authors is don't put your eyes on the bag. When you decide to become an author, don't put your eyes on the bag. You won't make money. You probably won't make money at all. And even if you do make money, you won't make money immediately. Don't water down your heart in the pursuit of money. That's the only thing that I can give as a piece of advice. Other than that, just read a lot of books, engage, discuss with people. Take out time to do it in the morning. Take out time to pick an idea that you're written down. Look at it for an hour, think about it for an hour, meditate on it, put it in your mind, and the idea will grow by itself. I can almost guarantee you that if you take an hour every day to look at, let's say, a novel idea, novel you are planning, and if you do that for a week, 2 weeks, the idea will begin to expand. Because that's just the nature of things. Whatever you focus on begins to expand. So that would basically be for the writing process. At least that's what works for me.
All right. So Johnson Turner, would like to thank you at this point for sharing your profound and amazing thoughts with us, all the way from Canada. I'm wishing you a very beautiful new year, and I hope that you achieve all your dreams. And you're an amazing scholar. I want you to keep to your dreams and your aspirations all through the year. And you know, we can keep talking for as long as we want, but we have other guests. And so we only hope that we'll take you up another time. But before you go, you know, there is an initiative that you are taking. I just wanted to make that one of your final statements before we take on our next guest. The Joe Share Poetry Prize. I wanted to make a statement on that, how it came about, and what we should look out for. And then you give us your final thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. I totally forgot that you brought it up. So I founded the Joe Literature. I started the Joe Literature Foundation in 25 April. It's a registered NGO in Nigeria, but working in registering it in Canada as well. As my vision for it was to use it as a platform to do three things, basically. To create the awareness of mother tongue in the internet. I think that many of our mother tongues are dying at a very alarming rate and people are not really taking note of it. The truth is, all languages are beautiful. Some languages may have more native speakers than others, but all languages are beautiful and they are a treasure trove of wonderful things. So it is alarming to me that our languages are dying very quickly and we are not taking note of it. Secondly, I wanted to use the Social Foundation as a platform to sort of engage with and boost reading culture in everything in secondary schools in our Akwa State, but across the South and hopefully across the country. And then thirdly, I also wanted to use the foundation as a platform to create humanities education awareness. Now, one of the things that is very sad is that if you look at Nigeria, for instance, and the entire world, there's a lot of funding, a lot of scholarship for people in STEM, right? People in science, tech, and it's almost as if the humanities thing for you. You know, sometimes we get second-class treatment in the humanities. I came to Canada to study on a fully funded scholarship, funded by the Department of English. But that is not available. Even here in Canada, most fundings you will find, it's almost as if it's a degradation of humanity. Meanwhile, we cannot really be humane without the humanities. So I created the foundation. Part of its tripartite goal is to create awareness. And our first initiative in 2025 was to start the Joe Poetry Prize. Now, the idea of the prize is to honor the legacy of Professor Joe Shi, who is one of the most outstanding and decorated poets from our region of the country, but is also a great scholar and a great mentor. And, you know, I believe that we shouldn't just celebrate the legacies of people that are far away from us. We should also celebrate the legacies of people that are close to us. So, Social Poetry Prize is in its first year. The inaugural prize will be awarded this year on the 20th. The winner will get $500 as payment. The two runners-up will get some sort of recognition as well. In the first year, we received over 1,000 entries from over 400 poets, which is phenomenal for the prize in the first year. We are working to publish the poems that were long-listed. There were about 30, but we only able to publish 27 because we had issues receiving consent from authors of 3 of the poems. So we're looking to publish that. So we are creating a platform for younger writers. You know, incidentally, the 3 people that have, incidentally, most of the people that were long-listed and subsequently shortlisted for the prize are people that come from the sciences. So what that is telling me is that we're not so different after all. The distance between the sciences and the humanities is not that great. Almost all of the people that are on the shortlist have who have a science background. That there's a girl who studies in mathematics. The only girl is a biochemist by training, you know, and all of that. See, we're just talking about the Jewish Prize and Prof, which is calling me right now. So, but like we're creating the prize as a platform to support Nigerian talent. And I can tell you, just go to our website, joepoetryprize.com, you will see that almost all of the poets are younger writers of my generation, and even younger. There's a guy who's 18 years old in the top list, and that's amazing. So we're encouraging everybody to enter for the 2027 prize. As this year's prize is closed, we'll call for entries sometime in February for the 2027 prize after we've concluded the award ceremony on the 20th. And people should get involved. You know, people should put in more effort. The Jewish Literature Foundation will roll out more initiatives in the future. We'll have a short story graphic, we'll publish fictions, we will do book campaigns, we'll do book festivals, we will bring back the literary consciousness to the state and to the region. And just before let me add, incidentally, the Jewish Poetry Prize is the only literary prize, the only literary prize that is resident in a book in our private state. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't know of other prizes that are specifically tied to you, and other prizes that are tied to other places hosted by our government. But the Jewish Poetry Prize is the first literary prize that tied to those. I don't know if Anna Bible State does prizes as an Anna National has its prize. So we should all come on it. And yes, that is more information you can check out. We are available on TikTok at Joy Literature Foundation. We are available on Facebook. We are available on X, and you can check out our website and see what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johnson, for your contributions to the growth of literature in New York and in Akwa Ibom State. I hope that with your inspiration, we will have more prizes, and with time, the state will be saturated with literary prizes to encourage authors to strive for perfection in the arts. So once again, thank you very much for coming on the Planeyo Book Circle. And one final word, what do you think of Planeyo Book Circle initiative as you take over?
No, you already know that I'm in Planeyo. My papers is published in Planeyo Journal after the my novel is published by Planeyo. And my collection of poems will be published by Planeyo. The character published here in Canada as well. And the Jewish Poetry Prize and Fellowship hopefully will be published by Planeyo. And I'm very, very interested in Planeyo. I think that Dr. Yoiton, who is the CEO of Planeyo, is also the first recipient of the Nigeria Prize, any of the Nigeria Prizes from a private state, which I think is a great thing and something that we should foster and encourage. So I'm all about Planeyo. First of all, I'm somebody that loves the infant industries, indigenous industries. If I can patronize other people, why can't I patronize my own people and get the same or even better quality? So the Planeyo Circle itself is a great idea. It's one of the things that we have in mind to do at the Joche Literature Foundation as we grow, because we don't have platforms that are dealing with literature on a rudimentary level such as this, bringing people into such way they can just read and talk about literature. It is great. Hopefully, by the next time that I will be coming on Planeyo, I would have started my PhD and I will be able to coordinate very structured engagement from the North American axis with Planeyo. I think that would be great. I have classmates who are doing their PhDs right now in very good schools that also write very good work and have very wonderful perspectives on things. Hopefully I can bring that, because what we're doing is great. One of the problems we have in Nigeria is small thinking. We can be doing phenomenal things for which people pay money to go outside to see, but just because we don't really see it as big, we think that it's a small thing. No, Planeyo is doing something very, very big, and I hope and pray that it will grow to a global scale.
All right, so on that note, I would like to thank you once again and wish you a very wonderful day. Have a nice day in Canada.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, bye.